She had learned to recognize fear by its silence. The diner sat at the edge of a forgotten highway, where headlights came and went like ghosts that never stayed, and every night felt just a little too long, just a little too quiet, like something was waiting just beyond the glass. Emily Carter moved behind the counter with careful hands, wiping the same spot twice, then a third time, not because it was dirty, but because it gave her something to control, something that didn't breathe or watch or return after dark. The neon sign outside flickered in uneven pulses, casting a dull red glow across the empty booths, painting the place in a color that never quite felt warm, and the air carried the scent of burnt coffee, old grease, and something colder underneath, something metallic that clung to the back of her throat. She didn't look at the door when it creaked. She never did anymore. Instead, she listened. The weight of footsteps told her more than faces ever could. Slow steps meant trouble. Confident steps meant ownership. Tonight, there were no steps yet, but that didn't mean safety. It just meant waiting. Her fingers tightened slightly around the rag as the clock above the register ticked louder than it should have, each second stretching thin like it might snap if pushed too far. And outside, a pickup truck passed without stopping, its headlights sweeping across the windows and disappearing into the dark like a promise that never belonged to her. This place used to feel different. Warmer. Alive. Her father had built it with his own hands, back when laughter filled the booths and the smell of fresh pie meant something good was about to happen. But now the walls held their breath, and the chairs sat too still, as if even they knew better than to make a sound. Emily exhaled slowly, steadying herself the way she had learned to do, quiet and invisible, and reached for the coffee pot, though no one had asked for a refill. Then the wind shifted. It was subtle, just a low push against the windows, a faint rattle of the loose sign outside, but it carried with it that same feeling, the one that settled in her chest like a warning she couldn't ignore. He shouldn't come back tonight. The thought slipped in uninvited, fragile but stubborn, and for a moment she let herself believe it, just for a second, just long enough to imagine what it might feel like to close early, to lock the doors, to step outside without looking over her shoulder. But hope, she had learned, was a dangerous thing when it arrived too easily. The bell above the door didn't ring. Not yet. And somehow, that was worse. Emily glanced toward the reflection in the window instead of the door itself, watching the empty room behind her, the dim lights, the shadows that stretched longer as the night deepened, and she noticed her own face there, pale under the neon glow, eyes tired in a way sleep could never fix. She straightened slightly, forcing her shoulders back, because even alone, she refused to look broken, and as the clock ticked again, louder this time, she realized the quiet wasn't peace. It was a pause, the kind that comes right before something changes, the kind that never asks permission. And somewhere out on that dark stretch of road, unseen and still distant, something was already on its way. The door finally opens, but not with the force she expects, not with the heavy certainty that usually fills the room before she can even breathe. Instead, it is soft, almost hesitant, the small bell above it giving a single, uncertain chime that fades too quickly into the stillness. And for a moment, Emily does not move, because unfamiliar sounds have their own kind of danger, the kind that does not announce itself loudly, the kind that waits to be understood. She keeps her eyes on the counter, finishing the slow circle she has been wiping, letting the seconds pass, counting them in her head like she always does, 1, 2, 3, before finally looking up, and when she does, the sight is not what her fear had prepared her for. A man stands just inside the doorway, tall but not imposing, his posture steady in a way that feels practiced rather than threatening, like someone who knows how to take up space without needing to claim it. His jacket worn but clean, the kind of dark canvas that has seen years of weather and miles of quiet roads, and beside him, just a step forward, is the dog. The German shepherd does not rush in, does not bark, does not even glance around with curiosity the way most dogs do in a new place. Instead, he pauses, still as a shadow, ears forward, eyes scanning not for comfort but for truth. And something about that stillness makes the air shift, subtle but real, like a change in pressure before a storm breaks. Emily straightens slightly, the rag lowering in her hand, and she forces her voice to stay level as she speaks. We are still open. The words simple, automatic, practiced, but they sound different tonight, like they belong to someone else. The man nods once, slow, respectful, and walks toward the counter with measured steps that do not echo too loudly against the worn floor, and the dog follows without needing a command, moving with a quiet precision that feels almost human, stopping just short of the counter as if he already understands boundaries that were never spoken. Coffee, the man says, his voice low, calm, not asking so much as accepting whatever comes next, and Emily turns to pour it, grateful for the familiar motion, the steady weight of the pot in her hand, the soft sound of liquid filling the cup, because routine is the only thing that keeps her from thinking too far ahead. But even as she sets the mug down in front of him, she can feel it, that difference in the room, that subtle shift that has nothing to do with words or actions, something quieter, something deeper, and she notices the dog again, how he is not relaxed, not even slightly, his body aligned, his gaze not fixed on her, not fixed on the man, but drifting, slow and deliberate, toward the back hallway where the kitchen meets the storage room, a place no customer ever cares about, a place no one looks, unless they have a reason. Emily's breath catches just a fraction, too small for anyone else to hear, but enough for her to feel, because that hallway has always held a different kind of silence, heavier, harder to explain, and she has learned not to think about it too much. The man notices it too, not the hallway, not yet, but the change in her, the way her shoulders tighten just slightly, the way her eyes flicker for less than a second before returning to him, and he does not ask anything, does not press, does not even look in the direction of the dog. But his hand rests near the edge of the counter, steady, grounded, like an anchor that has already decided to stay. Outside, another car passes without stopping, its headlights sweeping briefly across the glass before disappearing into the dark, and the neon sign flickers again, casting that uneven red glow across the room. But it no longer feels the same, because something has entered with the man and his dog, something that does not belong to fear, something quieter, something patient. Emily wraps her fingers around the edge of the counter, holding herself there, and for the first time in a long while, the silence does not feel like it is closing in. It feels like it is waiting. The clock ticks again, but this time it does not sound like a countdown. It sounds like something being measured, something being noticed, and Emily cannot explain why the air feels different now, only that it does, like a door has been opened somewhere she cannot see, letting something quieter slip inside. The man lifts the coffee cup slowly, not rushing, not filling the silence with unnecessary motion, and the faint curl of steam rises between them, carrying that familiar bitter scent that has always meant long nights and empty roads. But tonight it feels steadier, grounded, as if it belongs to something that does not break easily. The dog does not move. Not at first. His ears remain forward, his body still aligned toward the back hallway. And then, without warning, he takes a single step, then another, his paws making almost no sound against the worn floor, his movement so controlled it feels intentional in a way Emily cannot ignore. "Hey," she says softly, instinctively, the words slipping out before she can stop it. Not a command, not even a protest, just a reflex born from habit, from knowing that certain areas are not meant to be approached, not meant to be questioned. The man does not pull the leash. In fact, there is no leash. He simply watches, his gaze following the dog for a brief moment before returning to Emily, and there is something in his expression that is not concern, not surprise, but recognition, like he has seen this before, like he trusts what the dog is seeing even if he does not yet understand it himself. He does that, the man says quietly, his voice even, almost gentle, when something does not feel right. The words settle into the room, not heavy, not forceful, but impossible to ignore, and Emily feels them land somewhere deeper than she expects, somewhere she has spent a long time trying not to look. She glances toward the hallway again, just for a second, just long enough to feel that familiar tightening in her chest, the one that comes with memories she does not allow to fully form, and she shakes her head slightly, more to herself than to him. "It is just storage back there," she says, her voice softer now, less certain, as if she is repeating something she has told herself too many times. The dog stops at the edge of the hallway, his head lowering slightly, his nose testing the air, and then he stands there, unmoving, like a line has been drawn that he refuses to cross without reason. The man sets the cup down carefully, the soft clink against the counter sounding louder than it should, and for the first time since he entered, he shifts his posture, leaning forward just enough to close the distance between them without stepping closer. "Do you feel safe here?" he asks, and the question is simple, almost too simple, but it lands with a weight that makes Emily's breath catch before she can stop it. Safe. The word feels foreign, like something she remembers hearing a long time ago, but never quite learned how to hold on to. She opens her mouth to answer, to give the response she always gives, the one that keeps things steady, keeps things predictable, but nothing comes out at first, and in that silence, she realizes something she has not allowed herself to admit. She does not know how to answer that question anymore. Outside, the wind brushes against the windows again, softer this time, like it is passing by rather than pressing in, and the neon sign flickers once more, casting light across the man's face, revealing details she had not noticed before, the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the kind that come from years of watching, of waiting, of seeing things most people choose to ignore. He does not push her for an answer. He does not look away either. He simply waits, the same way the dog waits at the edge of the hallway, patient, certain, unmoved by the silence that would have made anyone else uncomfortable. Emily swallows, her fingers tightening against the edge of the counter again, and for the first time in a long while, she feels something shift inside her, something small, something fragile, but real, like the first crack in a surface that has been held too tightly for too long. "It depends on the night," she says finally, her voice barely above a whisper, and the moment the words leave her, she realizes they are the truth, not the version she has practiced, not the one that keeps everything in place, but the truth she has been carrying quietly, day after day, without ever speaking it out loud. The dog lifts his head slightly, as if hearing something beyond sound, and the man nods once, not in agreement, not in judgment, but in understanding, and in that quiet exchange, something unseen begins to take shape, something that does not rush, does not force, but waits for the right moment to be known. The silence holds for a moment longer, stretching thin between them like something waiting to be broken, and then the dog exhales, a slow, controlled breath that seems to carry a decision with it, and he turns his head slightly, not away from the hallway, but back toward the man, as if confirming something that does not need words. The man nods almost imperceptibly, a quiet exchange that passes unnoticed by anyone who does not know how to look for it, and then he shifts his attention fully to Emily again, his voice still calm, still measured. "My name is Daniel," he says, not offering a last name, not asking for anything in return, just placing it there between them like something simple and honest. Emily hesitates for a second before answering, her voice softer than before. "Emily." The names settle into the space, grounding it, making it feel less like a transaction and more like something human, something real, and yet the tension does not disappear, it only changes shape. Outside, the low hum of an engine drifts closer, slow and familiar, and Emily's body reacts before her mind catches up, her shoulders tightening, her hand gripping the edge of the counter just a little too hard, and Daniel sees it, not the cause, but the effect, the way fear moves through someone who has learned to hide it well. The headlights sweep across the diner windows again, but this time they do not pass by, they slow, lingering just long enough to cast long shadows across the booths, stretching them toward the counter like reaching hands, and then the engine idles. Emily does not turn to look. She does not need to. The rhythm of that engine, the way it settles into a low, patient rumble, is something she knows too well, something her body recognizes even when she tries not to think about it. Daniel follows her gaze, not to the door, but to the reflection in the glass, where the outline of a vehicle sits just outside the reach of the flickering neon light, waiting. The dog's posture changes instantly. His ears rise higher, his body stiffens, not with panic, but with purpose, and he takes one step back from the hallway, repositioning himself closer to the counter, closer to Emily, his presence no longer just observant, but protective in a way that feels deliberate. The bell above the door rings this time, sharp and certain, cutting through the quiet like a line being drawn, and the man who steps inside does not rush, does not hesitate. He moves with the ease of someone who expects the world to make room for him, his coat still carrying the cool night air, his eyes scanning the room not for welcome, but for control. Emily lowers her gaze instinctively, her breath steadying in that practiced way, her hands returning to motion, reaching for another cup, another task, anything that keeps her from being still. Daniel does not move. He remains where he is, one hand resting lightly on the counter, his posture unchanged, but there is a subtle shift in his focus, sharper now, more attentive, as he watches the new arrival without staring, without challenging, simply observing. The dog does not growl. Not yet. He stands quiet, but his eyes lock onto the man with an intensity that does not waver, reading something deeper than appearance, something that cannot be hidden by calm movements or controlled steps. The man approaches the counter, his presence filling the space without needing to raise his voice, and he gives Emily a brief glance, one that lingers just long enough to remind her of something unspoken, something understood without words. "You are still open," he says, his tone smooth, almost casual, but there is a weight behind it that makes the simple statement feel like something else entirely. Emily nods quickly, keeping her eyes down, placing a cup in front of him with steady hands that only tremble slightly at the edges, and for a moment, the three of them exist in the same small space, connected by silence, by tension, by things that have not yet been said. Daniel finally lifts his cup again, taking a slow sip, his gaze flicking briefly to the dog, then back to the man, and there is no confrontation in it, no challenge, only awareness, the kind that does not need to be announced to be understood. The neon sign flickers once more, casting uneven light across their faces, and in that shifting glow, something becomes clear, something that has been building quietly since the door first opened. This night is not going to pass the way the others have. Something has already begun to change, and none of them can pretend otherwise. The man's presence settles into the diner like something that has always belonged there, not loud, not forceful, but undeniable, and Emily feels it immediately in the way her breathing changes, slower now, more careful, as if each inhale has to pass through something invisible before it reaches her lungs. He does not sit right away. Instead, he stands at the counter, one hand resting lightly against the surface, fingers tapping once, then stopping, a quiet rhythm that suggests patience rather than impatience. And when he finally lowers himself onto the stool, it is with the ease of someone who is used to being waited for, not because he demands it, but because the world has learned to adjust around him. "Same as usual," he says, his voice smooth, controlled, carrying no edge but leaving no room for misunderstanding. And Emily nods before the words fully register, already reaching for the coffee pot, already moving through the routine that has been carved into her days like a path she cannot step off. The cup touches the counter with a soft sound, the coffee filling it in a steady stream, and she keeps her eyes on the task, because looking up would mean acknowledging too much, and she has learned that acknowledgement can lead to questions, and questions can lead to consequences she is not willing to face. Daniel watches the exchange without interruption, his expression unchanged, but there is a stillness to him now that feels different from before, more focused, more deliberate, as if something has clicked into place inside his mind. The dog shifts slightly closer to Emily, not enough to draw attention, not enough to cross any obvious boundary, but enough that his presence can be felt, a quiet warmth at the edge of her awareness, and for a brief second, her hand steadies in a way she does not fully understand. The man at the counter lifts his cup, taking a slow sip, his gaze drifting briefly toward Daniel, measuring, assessing, and then returning to Emily, as if nothing else in the room holds any real importance. "You have company tonight," he says, the words casual, but the way they settle makes them feel heavier, like a stone placed carefully in the center of a still pond. Emily forces a small nod, her voice barely above a whisper, just passing through. It is the safest answer. It always has been. Daniel sets his cup down gently, the sound quiet but intentional, and when he speaks, his tone is calm, almost conversational, but there is something beneath it that does not bend. "Not in a hurry," he says, and it is not a challenge, not a contradiction, just a statement that exists alongside the one Emily has given, neither canceling the other, but changing the shape of the moment in a way that cannot be undone. The man's eyes flicker back to him, just for a second, and in that glance, something unspoken passes between them, something that does not need to be named to be understood, and then it is gone, replaced by the same smooth calm that has defined his presence since he walked in. The neon light outside buzzes faintly, the red glow shifting across the counter, catching the edge of the coffee cups, the curve of the chrome fixtures, the small details that usually go unnoticed but now seem sharper, more defined, as if the world itself is paying closer attention. The dog lowers his head slightly, not in submission, but in focus, his eyes tracking every movement, every shift in posture, every subtle change in the air, and then, almost imperceptibly, a low sound escapes him, not loud enough to startle, not sharp enough to alarm, but deep, steady, and certain. It is not directed at Emily. It is not directed at Daniel. It is directed at something else entirely. The man pauses mid-sip, his hand stilling for just a fraction of a second before continuing. But the moment has already passed, already been marked, and Emily feels it in the way her chest tightens again, not from fear this time, but from something more complicated, something that feels like the edge of a question she has been avoiding for far too long. Daniel does not look at the dog. He does not need to. His gaze remains on the man across the counter, steady, unblinking, and when he speaks again, his voice is just as calm as before, just as measured, but there is a quiet certainty in it now, something that does not ask for permission. "This place," he says slowly, his fingers resting lightly against the edge of the counter. "It has been here a long time." It is not really a question, but it opens the door for one, and Emily feels it, that small shift, that subtle change in direction, like the moment a road begins to curve before you can see where it leads, and for the first time, she wonders if this night might not follow the same path as all the others, if something, somehow, has already begun to turn. The question lingers in the air longer than it should, stretching between Daniel and the man like something invisible but heavy, and for a moment, no one answers, not because they do not understand, but because each of them understands too well. Emily's fingers tighten slightly around the edge of the counter, the worn laminate cool beneath her skin, grounding her in a space that no longer feels entirely under her control, and she glances down, avoiding both of their eyes, because looking at either one would mean choosing a side she has never been allowed to choose before. The man lets out a quiet breath through his nose, almost a laugh, but not quite, and he sets his cup down with a soft, deliberate motion that echoes louder than it should in the stillness. "Long enough," he replies, his voice smooth, unhurried, but carrying a weight that suggests ownership without ever needing to say the word, and he leans back slightly on the stool, one arm resting along the counter as if settling into a position he has held many times before. Daniel nods once, slow and thoughtful, as if filing the answer away rather than reacting to it, and his gaze drifts briefly across the room, taking in the details most people overlook, the small cracks in the tile near the doorway, the uneven glow of the overhead lights, the way the back hallway seems to absorb light rather than reflect it, like a space that prefers to remain unseen. The dog shifts again, just a step closer to Emily, his body angled now between her and the man, subtle enough to pass as coincidence to anyone not paying attention, but deliberate enough to change the geometry of the room in a way that cannot be ignored. Emily feels it immediately, that quiet barrier, that unexpected presence at her side, and for the first time in years, she does not feel entirely alone behind the counter. The man notices it too. His eyes flick down for a fraction of a second, taking in the dog's position, the angle of his stance, the way his attention does not waver, and something flickers across his expression, not fear, not even irritation, but a kind of calculation, like he is reassessing a situation that no longer fits neatly into what he expected. "You travel with him?" the man asks, his tone casual, directed at Daniel, but shaped in a way that carries more than simple curiosity. Daniel rests his hand lightly against the counter, fingers still, his posture unchanged, and answers without hesitation, "He travels with me." It is a small difference, a subtle shift in wording, but it lands with quiet intention, drawing a line that does not need to be explained. The neon sign outside buzzes again, flickering just enough to cast the room in alternating shades of dim red and shadow, and in that shifting light, the diner feels less like a place and more like a moment suspended in time, something caught between what has been and what is about to happen. Emily reaches for the coffee pot again. Though no one has asked for more, her movements slower now, more deliberate, as if she is buying time she does not know how to use, and as she pours, her hand brushes lightly against the dog's shoulder. The contact is brief, accidental, but it sends a quiet warmth through her, steady and real, and the dog does not flinch, does not move away. He simply remains there, solid and present, like something she can lean on without needing to ask permission. The man watches the interaction, his gaze narrowing slightly, not in suspicion, but in recognition of something he cannot quite place, and he leans forward again, his voice lowering just a fraction. "This place has history," he says, not as a question this time, but as a statement that invites no denial. Emily swallows, her throat tightening, and she nods before she can stop herself, the motion small but undeniable. "My father built it," she says quietly, the words slipping out before she can weigh them, and the moment they are spoken, they seem to change something in the room, like a truth that has been waiting to be acknowledged. Daniel's eyes soften slightly, not with pity, but with understanding, and he nods once, as if that piece of information confirms something he already suspected. The dog lifts his head, his ears twitching, and then he looks toward the door again, not because someone is coming in, but because something outside has shifted, something unseen but felt, and his body tenses just enough to signal it. The man follows the movement with his eyes, then looks back at Emily, and for the first time, there is a hint of something less certain in his expression, something that does not belong to control. Daniel leans back slightly, his voice steady, calm, but carrying a quiet finality that settles into the space like a promise. "Places like this," he says slowly, his gaze moving from Emily to the man and back again. "They remember who takes care of them." The words are simple, almost gentle, but they linger in the air long after he finishes speaking. And in that silence, something begins to shift again, something deeper this time, something that does not move quickly, but does not stop once it has started. The words do not fade when he finishes speaking. They remain suspended in the air like something that has found its place, and Emily feels them settle deep inside her chest, quiet but steady, as if they have been waiting for her to hear them for a very long time. The man does not respond right away. He studies Daniel with a look that is careful, measured, no longer dismissive, no longer certain, and for the first time since he entered, there is a pause in his control, small but undeniable, like a step taken on ground that is not as solid as it once seemed. He leans back slightly on the stool, his fingers tapping once against the cup before going still again, and his gaze shifts briefly toward the dog, taking in the way he stands, the way he does not move, the way his presence alone seems to hold a line that cannot be crossed without consequence. "You talk like you know the place," the man says, his tone still smooth, but now carrying a trace of something sharper beneath it, something that searches rather than assumes. Daniel does not look away. His expression remains calm, unchanged, but there is a quiet certainty in his eyes that does not waver, and when he answers, his voice is just as steady as before. "I know what it feels like," he says, and the simplicity of the words makes them heavier, not lighter, as if they carry more truth than anything longer could. Emily's breath catches again, not from fear this time, but from recognition, because something in that sentence reaches her in a way nothing else has tonight, something that understands without needing explanation. The neon light flickers again, softer now, casting a warm glow across the counter that feels less harsh than before, and for a moment, the diner does not seem like a place caught in tension, but like something waiting to be claimed by a different kind of story. The dog shifts his weight slightly, pressing closer to Emily's side, not touching, but near enough that she can feel the warmth of him, steady and real, and without thinking, her hand lowers just enough to rest against his back. This time, she does not pull away. The contact stays, quiet and grounding, and the dog remains still, accepting it without reaction, as if it is the most natural thing in the world. The man notices. Of course he does. His eyes flick to her hand, then to the dog, and something changes again, something subtle but important, like a calculation that no longer leads to the same conclusion it once did. He exhales slowly, setting the cup down with deliberate care, and when he speaks again, his voice is softer, but not weaker. Just more controlled, more aware. "You have been here a long time," he says, his gaze returning to Emily, not asking, but confirming, and she nods before she can stop herself, the motion small but honest. The truth feels different now. It does not feel like something she needs to hide. Daniel watches the exchange without interruption, his posture relaxed but attentive, like someone who understands that some moments cannot be rushed, cannot be forced, only allowed to unfold in their own time. Outside, the engine that had been idling goes quiet. Not leaving, just still, as if the night itself has decided to listen. The silence that follows is no longer heavy. It is full of something shifting, something realigning, something that cannot go back to what it was before. The man glances toward the door for just a second, then back at Daniel, and there is a question in his eyes now, not spoken, not formed, but present all the same. Daniel meets it without hesitation, his voice calm, even, but carrying a quiet finality that leaves no space for doubt. "This place," he says, his hand resting lightly against the counter. "It does not belong to fear." The words land differently than anything else he has said, not as a suggestion, not as a challenge, but as a truth stated aloud, something that exists whether anyone agrees with it or not. Emily feels it the moment it settles, like a weight lifting just slightly from her shoulders, not gone, not yet, but lighter, enough for her to breathe a little deeper than before. The dog lifts his head, his ears easing just a fraction, and for the first time since he entered, his body relaxes, not fully, but enough to signal that something has changed. The man sits still for a long moment, his gaze moving between them, taking in the quiet connection that has formed without permission, without announcement, and when he finally stands, it is slower than before, more deliberate, as if he is adjusting to a space that no longer moves around him in the same way. He does not say anything as he reaches for his coat. He does not need to. The shift has already happened. And for the first time in years, Emily does not feel like she is waiting for the door to open again. She feels like something inside it has already begun to close. The door closes behind him with a soft click that echoes longer than it should, not because of the sound itself, but because of what it carries away, something subtle, something that had filled the room for so long it had become invisible, and now, in its absence, the air feels different, lighter, like a window has been opened somewhere no one can see. Emily does not move right away. Her hand still rests against the dog's back, fingers curled slightly into his fur, and she realizes she is no longer bracing for anything, no longer waiting for the next moment to tighten around her. And that realization feels unfamiliar, almost fragile, like something that could disappear if she acknowledges it too quickly. Outside, the engine starts again, but this time it does not linger, it does not idle, it simply fades into the distance, the sound growing softer until it becomes part of the night, no longer something that belongs to her. The neon sign flickers once more, but the light it casts feels warmer now, less harsh against the edges of the room, and the diner, for the first time in a long while, does not feel like it is holding its breath. Daniel remains where he is, his posture unchanged, his presence steady, as if he has been part of this place longer than the few minutes he has actually spent inside it, and he does not rush to fill the silence, does not offer words that might break what has just settled into place. He simply waits, the same way he has from the beginning, patient, certain, allowing the moment to belong to her. The dog shifts slightly under Emily's hand, not moving away, just adjusting, grounding himself more firmly beside her, and she feels it, that quiet assurance, that steady warmth that does not ask anything in return. She exhales slowly, a breath she did not realize she had been holding for what feels like years, and as it leaves her, something inside her loosens, not completely, not all at once, but enough to make space for something new. "He is not coming back tonight," she says softly, the words barely above a whisper, but they carry a weight that makes them real, more real than anything she has said in a long time. Daniel nods once, not in agreement, not in confirmation, but in acknowledgement, as if he understands that the sentence is not about prediction, but about choice, about something she has decided without fully realizing it. The clock continues its steady ticking above them, but it no longer sounds like a countdown. It sounds like time moving forward, simple and certain, and the back hallway, the one that had felt so heavy before, now sits in quiet shadow, no longer pulling at the edges of her awareness, no longer something she needs to avoid. Emily straightens slightly, her shoulders lifting just enough to change the way she stands, and she looks at the room, really looks at it, The worn booths, the scuffed floor, the counter her father once built with his own hands. And for the first time in years, she does not see a place she is trapped inside. She sees something that can be kept, something that can be held. Daniel reaches for his cup again, taking a slow sip, his gaze drifting briefly to the dog, then back to Emily. And when he speaks, his voice is quiet, but it carries a kind of clarity that does not need to be repeated. Places like this, he says gently, they stay with the ones who take care of them. Emily nods, the motion small but certain, and her hand remains where it is, resting against the dog, steady, grounded, present. Outside, the night continues the way it always has, the road stretching on, the wind moving through the empty spaces. But inside the diner, something has changed, something quiet and lasting. And for the first time, the silence does not belong to fear. It belongs to her. Morning arrives slowly, not with noise or urgency, but with a quiet kind of light that seeps through the diner windows in soft gold, touching the edges of the counter, the worn seats, the places where time has left its mark without ever asking permission. And Emily stands behind that same counter. But she is not the same woman who stood there the night before. The air smells different now, not because anything has changed in the kitchen, but because something inside her has, something small but steady, something that does not disappear with the daylight. The coffee brews fresh, the scent richer, warmer, and as it fills the room, it carries with it a feeling that had been missing for a long time, something close to peace, though she does not call it that yet, not out loud. Daniel is still there, not where he was before, not standing in quiet observation, but seated at one of the booths near the window, a place that catches the early sun, his posture relaxed, one arm resting along the back of the seat, as if he has allowed himself, just for a moment, to belong to this place without needing to explain why. The dog lies at his feet, stretched out but alert, his head resting on his paws, eyes half closed but aware, always aware, and when Emily glances at him, he lifts his head slightly, meeting her gaze with that same steady calm that has not wavered since the moment he walked in. She finds herself smiling, just a little, not forced, not practiced, but real in a way she almost does not recognize. The door opens again, but this time the bell sounds different, lighter somehow, and a truck pulls into the lot outside, not slowing, not hesitating, just stopping like it belongs there, and a man steps inside, glancing around with casual curiosity before taking a seat at the counter. "Morning," he says, his voice easy, familiar, and Emily answers without thinking. "Morning," the word leaving her lips with a warmth that feels natural, effortless, like something she has not had to search for. She pours his coffee, steady and sure, and for the first time in a long while, her hands do not tremble. The diner begins to fill slowly, not crowded, not loud, but alive in a way that feels honest. A couple of travelers passing through, a local stopping in for breakfast, small conversations rising and falling like gentle waves, and through it all, Emily moves with a quiet confidence, not rushing, not hiding, simply present. Daniel watches from his booth, not intervening, not directing, just observing with that same calm certainty. And when their eyes meet across the room, there is no question there, no doubt, only understanding. The kind that does not need to be spoken. The dog shifts slightly, stretching his legs before settling again. His presence now part of the rhythm of the place, no longer a signal of something wrong, but a quiet assurance that something is right. Emily glances toward the door once, out of habit more than fear, and for a brief second, she waits, not for something to happen, but to see if that old feeling will return, that tightness, that shadow, that weight she used to carry without noticing. But it does not come. The space remains clear, open, hers. She exhales slowly, a soft breath that carries no tension, no hesitation, and she turns back to the counter, to the people, to the small, ordinary moments that now feel like something more. Daniel finishes his coffee, setting the cup down with a quiet nod, and when he stands, he does not rush, does not make a scene. He simply steps toward the door, the dog rising beside him in one smooth motion, ready, steady, and before he leaves, he pauses just long enough to meet Emily's eyes one last time. There is no speech, no promise, just a look that says everything that needs to be said. She nods back, her expression calm, certain, and as the door closes behind them, The bell rings once more, soft and clear, and this time, it does not echo with fear. It fades into something else entirely. Something gentle, something lasting. And as the morning light fills the diner completely, Emily Carter stands behind the counter of a place that is no longer a prison, no longer a waiting room for something she cannot escape, but a home she has chosen to keep. And in the quiet space between one breath and the next, she understands something she has never allowed herself to believe before. Sometimes, the smallest act of presence, the quietest kind of courage, is enough to change everything. Not all at once, not in ways the world will notice, but in the way a life begins again, one steady moment at a time.